sponge drags across the same square foot of tile I've scrubbed every Saturday for 11 years. My knees ache against the grout. My mother-in-law's kitchen floor is white brilliant, unforgiving white, and she notices every scuff mark the way other people notice sunsets. "You missed a spot near the refrigerator," she calls from the living room. I don't answer. I move the sponge. My name doesn't matter much in this house. I'm just the one who shows up at 8 in the morning with rubber gloves and a bottle of enzyme cleaner. I'm the one who reorganizes the pantry shelves the way she likes them, canned goods facing forward, labels aligned, and vacuums the stairs in the direction the carpet fibers run. Because she showed me once, 4 years ago, and I've never forgotten, because forgetting in this house has consequences. My husband is her youngest son. We met in graduate school, got married at 27, moved 40 minutes away from his parents' house in Connecticut. The distance sounded healthy when we discussed it before the wedding. Far enough for privacy, close enough for family. What I didn't understand then was that close enough for family meant something very specific to my mother-in-law. It meant Saturdays, every Saturday. Rain, snow, the week after I had a root canal, the weekend my own mother flew in from Oregon for a visit. Every Saturday, I drove to the White House with the black shutters and I cleaned it. I want to be fair. In the beginning, it wasn't a demand. It was a request framed gently, the way my mother-in-law frames everything that is actually non-negotiable. She'd had a surgery, a knee replacement, the autumn after our wedding. She couldn't manage the stairs well. She asked if I could help out just for a few months until I'm back on my feet. I said yes. Of course I said yes. What kind of daughter-in-law says no to a woman recovering from surgery? The few months became 6 months. The 6 months became a year. The knee healed. The Saturdays did not stop. My husband, I'll be honest about this part, did not notice for a very long time. He is not a cruel man. He is a distracted one. He grew up in that house watching his mother do everything herself, efficiently, without complaint, and I think somewhere in the back of his mind he assumed I was doing the same, managing efficiently without complaint, because that is simply what women in his family do. His sister never cleaned the house. She visited on holidays, brought wine, sat at the kitchen island laughing while I stood at the sink. She has a demanding job, my mother-in-law explained once, unprompted. A director at a marketing firm downtown. Very busy. Very important. I had a demanding job too. I managed operations for a mid-sized logistics company. I handled freight contracts and vendor disputes and a team of 17 people who relied on me to make decisions quickly and correctly. I was good at it. I was, in fact, very good at it. But I was also good at cleaning tile grout, apparently, and at folding fitted sheets the way my mother-in-law preferred, and at being available. The first time I tried to say something, it was a Tuesday evening in February, 3 years into the arrangement. I'd had a terrible week at work, a vendor dispute that nearly collapsed a contract worth more than my annual salary, and I came home at 8 o'clock and sat down at the kitchen table and said to my husband, "I don't think I can do Saturdays anymore. I'm exhausted." He looked up from his laptop. He had the expression of someone trying to locate a problem on a map they've never fully looked at. "You mean every Saturday?" he said. "Yes, every Saturday, for 3 years." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "She really depends on you, though." I went to bed without finishing the conversation. He didn't bring it up again. Neither did I. And the following Saturday, I was back on my knees in the white kitchen. This is the part that's hard to explain to people who haven't lived it, how you let it keep going, how every individual Saturday feels manageable. It's only 4 hours. It's only this once more. The holidays are coming and she's been sweet lately, and you keep deferring the confrontation because the confrontation feels bigger and scarier than the cleaning. And then you look up and it's been 11 years. I missed my college roommate's baby shower because it fell on a Saturday and my mother-in-law had guests coming the following day and the house really needs to be perfect. I missed a weekend trip to Vermont with my work friends. I missed. And this is the one that sits with me. I missed the morning my father called to tell me my grandmother had passed because I was standing in my mother-in-law's bathroom scrubbing the underside of her toilet lid, and I had my phone on silent because she prefers it that way. I found out 3 hours later. My sister had been trying to reach me. I cried in my car in the driveway before I drove home. I didn't tell my mother-in-law why I was leaving early. I just said I wasn't feeling well. She said I looked pale and asked if I'd remembered to wipe down the baseboards in the guest room. I had. Here is what I think about now. When I try to trace the line back to where things changed, I think it was the anniversary party. My in-laws' 35th wedding anniversary fell in late September 2 years ago. My mother-in-law planned a dinner party catered, she emphasized, because it was a special occasion, and she asked me to help coordinate. Emails with the caterer, a floral arrangement, a photo display of their marriage across the decades, a slideshow my husband's sister was supposed to put together but kept delaying because of her demanding job. I did all of it. I spent 3 evenings that week on the logistics. I drove to the florist twice. I built the slideshow myself, 42 slides, music selections, the right transitions. The party was lovely. My father-in-law gave a toast. My mother-in-law cried. Her friends surrounded her and said what a beautiful evening it was. At no point did anyone mention my name in connection with the beautiful evening. My husband said great job to me privately in the car on the way home. He meant it, but privately in the car on the way home, like it was a work performance review, not a marriage. His sister, who had shown up with a bottle of champagne and a dress I couldn't afford, told my mother-in-law at dinner that the slideshow was exactly what she would have made. My mother-in-law beamed. She has such a good eye, she said, gesturing at her daughter. I ate my catered salmon and said nothing. I started paying attention after that. Really paying attention. I started noticing the texture of things I'd been smoothing over for years. I noticed that my mother-in-law called my husband every Sunday morning, and the conversations lasted 40 minutes and were mostly about his sister, her job, her new apartment, her trip to Spain. My husband relayed these updates to me over breakfast as though they were news, which I supposed to him they were. I noticed that when we visited for the holidays, my sister-in-law was asked which chair she preferred and given first choice of the guest rooms. I was asked whether the guest bathroom had enough towels because sometimes the housekeeper, meaning me, forgot to restock. I noticed that my name in my mother-in-law's vocabulary had gradually been replaced by you, not in an accusatory way, just in a forgetting way, the kind of forgetting that happens to furniture. What I also noticed was this. I was tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. I was tired in the way of people who have been giving something away for a long time and only recently noticed that the account is nearly empty. The decision didn't arrive dramatically. I didn't have a moment of revelation. I was driving home one Saturday in early October, and I passed a pottery studio with a sign in the window, Saturday drop-in classes, 9 a.m. to noon. I had wanted to take a ceramics class since college. I'd mentioned it to my husband once, years ago. He'd said, "That sounds fun, you should do that." I enrolled that afternoon. The following Friday, I texted my mother-in-law. I kept it simple. I told her that starting next weekend, I'd no longer be available on Saturdays. I didn't apologize. I explained that I had a recurring commitment and that I wanted to give her enough notice to make other arrangements. Her response came in 17 minutes. It was long. It covered how much she depended on me, how she wasn't sure she could manage on her own, how she had a bad back. The knee had been replaced. A bad back had since arrived, how she hoped I wasn't pulling away from the family. I read it carefully. I wrote back. I understand this is an adjustment. I'm sure you'll figure out a good solution. Then I put my phone down and made dinner. My husband came home from his run and I told him what I'd done. I watched his face move through several expressions. Surprise, discomfort, a kind of cautious calculation. She's going to be upset, he said. I know. She really relies on you. I know that too. I set 2 plates on the table. She's been relying on me for 11 years, and I haven't taken a Saturday for myself in 11 years. I'd like some Saturdays back. He was quiet. Then he said, I didn't realize it had been that long. I looked at him across the kitchen. I know you didn't, I said. And that was almost worse. The first Saturday I didn't go was a revelation. I sat at a wheel with my hands covered in wet clay and I made 3 lopsided bowls that the instructor said showed good instincts. I drove home afterward and bought myself lunch at a restaurant I'd been curious about for months and sat at a table by the window with a book. My phone had 8 messages on it by the time I got home. My mother-in-law. My husband, who was at his parents' house and had apparently been fielding questions about me. My father-in-law, who almost never texted me, saying he hoped everything was all right. My husband again. The messages were a mix of concern and accusation, often occupying the same sentence. Was I feeling okay? Had something happened? She'd had to ask her neighbor for help, and it was very embarrassing. Was I unhappy with the family? Was I having problems with my husband? I replied to my husband, "I'm fine, had a great morning." "How are you?" he called. I let it go to voicemail and finished my lunch. That evening he came home and sat down across from me and said quietly that he thought we needed to talk. I agreed. We talked for almost 2 hours. It was, genuinely, one of the most honest conversations we'd had in years. I told him everything I told myself in the car on those 11 years of Saturday drives home. I told him about my grandmother's death. I told him about my Vermont, about the baby shower, about the anniversary party. He was quiet for a very long time after that. "Why didn't you say any of this sooner?" he finally asked. "I tried," I said. "February, 3 years in, you said she really depends on me." He put his face in his hands. He called his mother the next day. I don't know everything that was said. I was in the garden, ostensibly pulling up the last of the summer tomatoes, but I could hear the tone of his voice through the back door, and it was different from his usual Sunday call tone. Lower. More deliberate. When he came outside, he looked tired in a way I recognized. "She's upset," he said. "I know. She said she doesn't understand what she did wrong." "That's probably true," I said. He sat down on the garden steps. I told her we needed to rethink the Saturday arrangement, that it wasn't fair to you. I waited. She said she thought you liked coming. Something moved through me then, not anger exactly. Something older and more complicated. "Did you tell her that no one had ever actually asked me?" He nodded. She didn't have an answer for that. It took 3 more weeks, and 2 more difficult phone calls, and one dinner at the White House where my mother-in-law was brittle and overly formal, and my father-in-law kept trying to move conversation toward neutral topics like the weather and their neighbor's new dog. My sister-in-law called me separately to ask what was going on. I told her. There was a long pause. "I didn't know you were going every week," she said. "I know you didn't," I said. Which was the same thing I'd said to my husband, and it was still almost worse. By November, something had shifted. Not fixed shifted. My mother-in-law called me on a Wednesday, which she had never done before. She asked how I was. Not as preamble, the way she usually did. She asked and then waited for an actual answer. I told her I was well. I told her the ceramics class was going well. There was a pause. "What do you make?" she asked. "Mostly bowls," I said. "Some mugs? I'm terrible at handles." She made a small sound that was almost a laugh. "Your father-in-law can't make handles either," she said. "He took a woodworking class years ago. Still can't cut a proper joint." I didn't know that. In 11 years, I had never known that. We talked for 22 minutes. About nothing consequential. About clay and woodworking and a restaurant on the bay she'd been curious about for months. At the end of the call, she said carefully, like she was measuring the words before releasing them, "I think I owe you an apology. I'm not sure I knew how to see you properly. I'd like to try to do better." I didn't say it was fine. I didn't say don't worry about it. I said, "I'd like that too. The Saturdays are mine now. Some of them I spend at the pottery studio. Some of them I sleep until 9 and take a long walk and read. Last month my college roommate, the one whose baby shower I missed, came to visit for a weekend, and we spent Saturday at a farmer's market and then ate too much at dinner and stayed up too late talking. And when I woke up Sunday morning, I didn't have the specific low-grade dread that had lived in my chest for 11 years. I notice its absence the way you notice a sound stopping that you'd stopped registering as a sound. My husband and I still visit his parents. We go for Sunday dinner sometimes, and the conversation is different now. Not dramatically, not in ways an outsider would notice. But I notice. My mother-in-law asks me questions and waits for the answers. She told me last month, in the kitchen while we were doing dishes together, voluntarily, side by side, that she'd found a cleaning service that comes on Thursdays. She seemed proud of herself for solving the problem. "Good," I said. "Is she any good?" "She's very thorough," my mother-in-law said. Then, after a moment, "Not as thorough as you. But that's all right." It was the closest thing to a compliment I'd ever heard her give anyone. I dried the glass I was holding and set it on the shelf. My father-in-law still can't cut a proper woodworking joint apparently. He showed me the uneven shelf he'd built for the garage with an expression of such genuine self-deprecation that I laughed. An actual laugh, not a polite one. He looked pleased. On the drive home that Sunday, my husband reached over and held my hand on the gear shift, which he hadn't done in a long time. "Thank you," he said. "For what? For not giving up?" He was watching the road. "On any of it. On me. On them. For staying." I thought about that for a while, the version of me who might not have stayed, who might have let the 11 years harden into something impossible to come back from. I understood her. I wasn't her. "Don't make me come clean your parents' house," I said. He laughed. We drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. I still have the 3 lopsided bowls from my first ceramics class. They sit on the windowsill in our kitchen. They are genuinely not very good. The rims are uneven, and the glaze on the middle one has a strange orange streak where I applied it unevenly. But every Saturday morning, when I pass them on the way to the coffee maker, I think, I made those. On a Saturday that was entirely mine. That turns out to be worth quite a lot. I think about the woman I was on that first Saturday morning, when I didn't drive to the White House. I sat at a pottery wheel with clay-covered hands and I made 3 bowls that weren't very good. But I made them. That distinction, making something imperfect that was entirely mine, turned out to matter more than I knew at the time. What I've come to understand is this: when you give without being asked, when you absorb discomfort quietly and keep showing up anyway, you are not being generous. You are training the people around you to believe that your time costs nothing, that your presence is a utility, not a gift. My mother-in-law didn't set out to take advantage of me. I genuinely believe that. But I handed her the arrangement on a Saturday morning 11 years ago, and I kept renewing it every week without renegotiating, and somewhere in all that quiet compliance she stopped being able to see me as someone with a separate interior life. The hard part, the part I sat with for a long time, is that I was responsible for half of that. Not because I deserved what happened, but because I kept choosing silence when I had the option to choose honesty. That one Tuesday in February when I tried and he said, "She really depends on you," I could have pressed further. I didn't. I went to bed and the next Saturday I was back on my knees on the tile. I made that choice, understanding that didn't excuse the dynamic, but it gave me back something I hadn't realized I'd surrendered: agency. There's a difference between enduring something and accepting it. I had been enduring for 11 years while telling myself I was being patient, being kind, being a good daughter-in-law. Patience is a genuine virtue. But patience pointed entirely inward, used only to suppress your own needs so others stay comfortable. That isn't patience. That's erosion. What finally changed things wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't anger, though the anger was there and I think it deserved to be. What changed things was just a decision. A ceramics class. A text message without an apology attached. The willingness to tolerate someone else's discomfort without immediately trying to fix it. That willingness, sitting with a 17-minute response and writing back 2 calm sentences instead of backpedaling, took more out of me than 11 years of Saturday cleaning ever did. Honesty, when you've been avoiding it for a long time, is genuinely exhausting. But it's the kind of exhaustion that ends. The other kind doesn't. My mother-in-law asked me once what I make in ceramics class. That question, small, curious, actually waiting for an answer, landed differently than almost anything she'd said to me in 11 years of Saturdays, because it was the first time she'd asked about something that was mine. Not about whether the baseboards were done. About me. That 22-minute phone call about clay and woodworking and a restaurant on the bay told me something. People can learn to see you if you give them the opportunity. But you have to stop making yourself invisible first. You have to take up the space that was always yours to take. The 3 lopsided bowls are still on my windowsill. Every Saturday morning I pass them on the way to the coffee maker. And I don't feel the dread anymore. I just feel like myself. That, it turns out, was all I ever wanted.